far from there. Okay, so we're going to talk about REST design pitfalls. First of all, hi Spring I/O is my first time here. I've been dreaming to come here for at least 5 years. So I finally managed to be in wonderful Barcelona with you today. My name is Victor. I have 18 years of coding in Java. I'm a Java champion using Spring for more than 10 years. And I'm doing workshops and consultancy at a very unhealthy number of companies. This is not a healthy lifestyle. I do not recommend you do that with your own life. The thing is that every time I find myself repeating over and over the same ideas in several workshops, I try to extract a talk like this and give it to the conference. So you can find a lot of my talks online. I also do regular webinars for my community that is the largest community in the world about how to write clean, maintainable code. And I also try to have a life. Okay, REST API design. Let's turn the time back to TCP/IP, and let's hear one of its creators, John Postel, saying that to be robust, the system should be conservative in what it does, but liberal in what it accepts from others, lenient about the expectations about what others are doing for you. So basically, that means, in a nutshell, backwards compatible. And to warm up the spirit after lunch, let's have some fun. Can somebody point me to one change we could do? This is a request that we receive in one of our REST APIs. This is a response that our API returns back to our clients. They don't have anything one with the other, but the one is the request, one is the response. Now, you be so kind and tell me some examples of changes I could do in either of the two payloads that would force my client to upgrade. So cause me a breaking change, please. Who wants to start? But you have to shout because I'm far. What can I do in one of these? Please, shout. Mandatory field. The phone was not mandatory, but it became. 4 more, please. Breaking changes. Cause the breaking change. Types. For example, who gives the age as a string, isn't it? Good. Next, 3 more. Change the name of the property. This is evil, thank you. And let's rename this property first name to be something much better. For example, F name. Beautiful. What else? The date format, who does that? Is it US or European? Beautiful, thank you. Please start ISO, right? Year dash month dash day. What else? Validation of any sort. For example, is that an email? Ew, brother. Okay, so thank you. These are all the things you can do wrong. I want to draw your attention specifically about these little here, the euro, which is an enum, and in the request, you refuse to accept for some reason this type of currency. And then you breaking change your clients who are going to give you that. Or you return another type of value for one of your enums. This is a common surprise for my clients saying, oh, oops, we changed an enum, kaboom. All right. Of course, adding new fields or not needing a field in the input, this is not a breaking change. So this is like, hello, backwards compatibility 101 checks, right? So we don't want to breaking change our clients. We don't want to force them to upgrade, right? So we're going to keep adding new optional inputs. We're going to keep adding more outputs in our response. And we're going to keep doing this, and it's quite okay until a point in which you see this phone is received as a single string or returned as a single string, and one day, not to breaking change our clients, we will return or accept the phone also by the 2 components it has, prefix and local number. Can you imagine seeing in the response this? Both the false phone and the phone broken down into? Beautiful. Maybe this can be okay, but imagine this in a request. Now it's fun. The client can give you the full string or the phone as the 2 components. So this happens in governmental systems in Romania. There are APIs that accept different representation of the same data, basically, not to breaking change their clients. This is a gray area, and as you can see, this starts to stink, right? So this kind of adds to the semantic technical depth of the API. The API starts to degrade in quality, right? So what will you do at some point? You will draw the line and say, okay, from now on, V2. Beautiful. Because your logic is going to start then to be polluted with if version equals. Anyone has in code if version equals 3? Anyone? Anyone? Let's see. I see some hands. Excellent. And then when you create version 2, what would you do? You will copy-paste stuff, of course. Copy-paste the DTOs and change them a bit, and mappers and all the things. So the code is going to degenerate. So ideally, I all wish you that you will never have to support more than 2 parallel versions. And here goes nothing. Any one of you had to support 3 or more parallel versions at the same time? Wave a hand. Excellent. I see like 20 people in the room here. Excellent. Not nice. Now, what you need to do first thing is to find what client uses your API. Of course, the first place you go is to the auth token service accounts to see who is authorized to call you. But rather, I would say that a more robust way to find your clients would be to use observability things like trace ID, right? Go to your Zipkin or some sort and to analyze which API actually sends you a request. Pact.io, I want an honorable mention here. It allows you to determine which of your clients needs what field in your contract. This is really interesting. You can see which systems need what field in your response. Right? Then the next thing that happens is the great battle war with the clients, forcing them to upgrade from V1 to V2. Of course, the first thing you're going to do, phone them, beg them, kick them, not give them any new features, right? Increasing the fees, lowering the rate limiter. Don't do this. And then there is also the kind way of doing things. For example, providing some guidelines, migration guidelines, examples, open rewrite recipes. You can provide, this is like extreme. Show them give them some automated tool that would do 90% of their migration, right? And the way of the ninja, call them. Call them and ask, can I help you? Do you want me to code with you? If you both are in the same company, this can actually work. Whatever you do, don't do this. Don't throw random errors. And don't start lying that version 1 is vulnerable. Please upgrade to version 2. Someone just told me that several weeks ago. It worked, he said. And then he said Trump, and it worked. Beautiful. Otherwise, you're going to maintain a lot of versions in parallel, and you'll go to therapy. And once you are past the therapy, next thing you do when you will get to create a new API, you're going to do whatever it takes not to have to break and change your client anymore in the future. So what will you do? You have to get or receive an email. Guess what? You're not going to give it a single string. It will be too easy. Let's give an array. Beautiful. Who knows? Perhaps tomorrow we will have more emails. Beautiful. Phone, is that a work phone or a personal phone? We don't know. Just in case, let's say it's a work phone. If you pass anything but a work, and you must always have a work phone, right? But just in case, to allow you tomorrow to add more types of phone, let's overly complicate the API from today. Yes. Beautiful. And that culminates with the dreaded metadata or extensions. Have you ever seen this map of string to anything? Please enjoy the moment. It's name, basically, the age is a random key, value is some value, but the value can actually be a sub-object. You know what this means? It means you shit on your schema. It is the lack of any schema, right? It's absolutely RMI. I don't know, it's absolutely not good. This is how I saw projects dying, really, in practice. Now, okay, so you have V2, don't do that. How do you actually version, the strategy to version? Of course, the most common is to /V2 in your URI, but I want to draw your attention about the opinion of Roy Fielding, the creator of REST. V1 in your URI is the middle finger to your API clients, technically telling them, oh, I'm going to screw you. Oh, this is just V1. Nice. Okay, so now another interesting discussion I had with the CTO of the largest tea shop in Romania. He basically shocked me, saying, Victor, we all know how hard we will try not to break and change the client. So if I can't just add an optional input, I have to get more input, or I have to break the structure of my response, then something dramatic might have happened. And he was saying, Victor, I might as well create another microservice with another database and another Git. Can you hear that louder a bit? The emotion didn't get. Anyway, even louder. The feeling is, It's dramatic. I want the people to feel it, right? So basically, a new service. So then the first one has to die in 3 months, and that's it. This follows the principle called design by deletion, or for deletion. When you, from the start, design the thing to be easy to remove when it's done. Of course, no more features will be added to the first version. This is brutal. This is dramatic. Huh? Now, rather than worrying about the versioning and when and how, a very important topic is how fast can we detect a breaking change? And my system is in the center, my client is in the left, the one that calls me, and who I call is on the right. One thing I would invite you to do is to set in on yourself a test which proves that the contract you extract, so you Spring Boot test your application, you go to V3 API docs, and you extract the Open API contract from the actual code. And you cross-check that Swagger, or that Open API, with an Open API you stored yesterday on your Git. Does this make sense? It's an approval test. You make sure that you didn't break your contract since yesterday. And if you did break it, you need to, if you accept the change, you will overwrite the Git version, yeah, pushing the new version. I will post the links afterwards, and you can click those links there to take you to some GIST, some of my training material to see how you can just copy-paste your application, basically. So it makes sure that you don't accidentally break your contract, right? Now, if you want to make sure that the contract that you consume is in sync with the contract that they provide, that's a more dark story, because we all are in different Git repositories. There are 2 solutions for you here. One is Spring Cloud Contract, the other is Pact. The bottom line is that some build is going to crash somewhere when the contracts go mismatching from one another. Right? This is particularly useful if the client and the server do not speak the same language. Right? It's C# in Java, Python in Java, Python in PHP, whatever. Right? These are interesting to keep in sync somehow. Now, also, it's interesting. Some of us are lucky and have a very homogeneous code base in which the client and the server, the client and the microservice, everyone is in the same language, suppose Java. In that case, a common pattern would be to have your clients import your client jar and call you through the jar. Anyone in the room doing that? To call a service, you have to import a jar. As you can see, there are some people doing. And there's a trick you could use in that case. Well, technically, the provider of the service is going to push on some internal repository the new version of the client jar, and then you can have bots like the Pendabot and Renovate, which are going to scan every repository to find if there is a newer version of a certain library. And they will propose a pull request automatically for your client systems. This can basically upgrade them very easily to the newer version. Sometimes even to a major version. Sometimes they might not be impacted by a change you did, and the transition is smooth. So this basically reduces the number of projects you have to call to tell to migrate to the newer version, right? And you should be looking in these 2 anyway for vulnerability fixing, right? To keep upgrading to the newest. So this is more interesting, really, right? How do you make sure that your clients are close to you? Right. Now, the next section talks about performance. Now, I want to ask you guys, if you have a ton of records, millions of records in a database, and you only expose those to a get by ID, what can go wrong? You have millions in the database, and the only way they can access it is by get ID. What can go wrong? They will iterate through the collection of identifiers, firing you requests in a loop. Yeah, and they discover parallel stream. Yeah. Right, so this is basically a performance massacre, right? The network is going to suffer, the CPU, the memory, that is going to be a lot of churn of memory allocating connections, going to the database to fetch one by one. It is officially stupid. So what you can do is to try to fetch multiple at once, of course, right? Process it in batches. So you could have the client send you the IDs they want. And if they send you the IDs like that, there is a problem that if the URL grows over 2,000 characters, different machines on the way might truncate the URL because they are nice to you. So you will lose that information. So one thing that I've seen very often is a post to get. What is your opinion about a post that gets? Beautiful, huh? I'm going to get with a post. Beautiful. So, and then the guy provided 100,000 IDs. Can you imagine the size of the response payload coming back? The response is in the room. Out of memory. Yeah. Unless they use some fancy content type like JSON new line delimited. You should be reading that. I've seen one client of mine passing 1 gig of JSON response, and the client didn't die. Read. It's indecent for sure, but it works. So keep response decent with a number of IDs less than 1,000, for example. Now, another idea would be to go back to get and say, hey, can I get and put those IDs in the body of the get? What do you think about this? A get with a payload, with a request payload. What do you think about this? I see a finger like that. Anyone? When I learned the HTTP, that wasn't possible. It turned out that about 3-4 years ago, some hacker hacked the HTTP RFC, came during the night, and said, let me change the HTTP standard. And let's have get being able to carry a body. However, this is risky because the routers, the systems your request goes through, might be kind enough to truncate the body of the get. I've been told a while ago that Azure has some issues, but I can't confirm right now. It's risky, right, to do that. So honestly, post is good enough. Now, I want to show you something fun that one of my people in workshop told me. Yes, Victor, we did that, and you know what those guys did? They've called us with the same 4, passing us a list of exactly 1 ID to minimize the impact in their code. So we kindly rate limited them and telling them in the response error that, hey, please use the batch endpoint, please. You see how evil this is? Beautiful, huh? Now, before you start engineering more, you could say that providing this batch API would be a premature optimization. And my advice is indeed to just set up the necessary alarms in production and wait to detect thousands of requests per second from the same system to the get by ID. And then alarms go off and you implement this API. So it could be prematurely to do this from the start. Now, another opinion from one of my senior people in the groups was that, hey, Victor, but why exactly do they need to download hundreds of thousands of my entities? What are they doing with it? Why do they want to download my database? Let's talk about responsibilities. What they are doing in there is really their stuff, or is it actually my role to do that kind of work? So you need to think a bit the boundaries. Are the boundaries correct? Am I writing the logic on the right side of the line? Or should that be in my house? Right? Give that a thought. And now another guy in my group said, Victor, are these sequential IDs? And the guy was a pen tester.
Over and out.
Yeah, you got that yummy, yum, that yummy, yum, that yummy, yummy.
What would he do in that case? Ooh, let's loop. Let's try. If you do this over the internet, you are looking for trouble, right? Combined with another vulnerability, they can download your data. And I had a client with exploited vulnerability in production because of that. So it's nice to send UIDs or some scrambled, unscannable identifiers, right? Nice. Now, the next story goes like this, somewhat similar, right? Your client goes over the slow network to call 2 microservices. Every time when it opens a page, in web or mobile, they need to call 2, 3, 4, 5 services to get a lot of data back. And that's not efficient if the client is in a tunnel using the mobile. What is the solution for this problem? Anyone? Not clear? Many calls when you load a single page to many different microservices behind the scenes. Okay, through an API gateway, but you're going to just fire 7 requests from the browser to the server. What is the solution to optimize performance? back and forth front end, an aggregator system, which is going to sit in between, fetch the things you need from both services in milliseconds, and give it to you over the slow network, one in an entire whole. Make sense? Aggregator, back and forth front end, name it how you want. Now, honorable mention for GraphQL. Question, anyone has seen this video? 1 month ago, 165,000 views. This is not possible. In this video, in Java 1 this year, one of the platform team guys in Netflix using Java said, rest in peace. Technically saying they don't use REST at all. And they use only GraphQL on the boundary with the devices and gRPC behind that thing with the downstream systems. A kind reminder for all of you in the room here, you are not Netflix. Just as a warning, someone told me that yesterday, I need to repeat to you, you are not Netflix. Just be kind, be humble. But it is interesting. They use GraphQL to aggregate data from a bunch of services to limit the number of round trips over the slow network. Make sense? GraphQL, that's its star feature. Right? Nice. In the same spirit, maybe you did this back and from front end a while ago, but A calls B, that B calls C, and if you look at the system right now, you will find that you take the response from C and you give exactly as it is to A. So my question is here, why are we doing that? Anyone in the room doing this just calls another service, gets exactly the response, and sends it to the next system downstream? Excellent. There are like 10 hands in the room. Why would we do that? Usually because of some security or decoupling purpose. But it's funny, when these were something of the past, there was a time in which we had to decouple, but if you look right now, you will find yourself proxying the request to the next service downstream, not adding any value. That's a waste of resources, right? You are killing the planet. So A could call C directly, of course. The problem is that every team looks at its own microservice, and no one really oversees the whole picture sometimes. No one is looking at the zipkin, at the traces, at the big picture to see who calls who. That is obviously wrong, but sometimes it slips. Another interesting discussion about performance, bad performance, is remember the days that, anyone is old enough to have used stateful AGBs? Stateful AGBs. Okay. That time, or struts, beautiful. You opened a search to the backend, and then you asked for the next page. Remember the times? Beautiful, excellent. That forces the server to retain state about the client. So the load balancer can no longer round robin the requests to a bunch of instances. The instances have to use sticky sessions with the client. Again, this is going to hurt performance. Does this make sense? Maybe you've seen this situation before. It's really, really annoying. So these are some problems that some mistakes you can commit in terms of performance with API design. Forcing your clients to call you in a loop, passing huge payloads, or maybe asking the request to call too many requests one after the other, right? Request proxying by accident stateful endpoints, and the one you're going to see next. This is performance, right? So this is what we often mean by scalability, but this word, scalability, is overloaded with meanings, with semantics. When I use it in my architecture workshop, very often people in the group use scalability to mean not latency or throughput, but to mean scaling complexity, right? Keeping code clean in spite of 100 features added in 3 months. Scaling complexity. So that's the next topic. How do we design our REST APIs so we can scale complexity nicely with time? For a second, imagine this is your domain model. If that definition is not clear for you, that is the structure that you build most of your complexity on. If you're using an ORM, it's a high chance that this is actually your entity model with Hibernate. Maybe. This domain model, right, the most precious structure in your world that is involved in the most dark flows you have, is exposed as JSON through the REST API. What is your opinion? Shit, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Shit, excellent, indeed. Why? And I'm not asking you because you don't know. I'm asking you because you have to rehearse this as a discussion to your juniors in the teams back home. Why is this shit? Why? Silence. Never silence. Please, why? You cannot change the fields in your core structure because you're going to break your client. Make sense? Everyone understands. It should be like reflex for you to explain to the others. It will freeze your domain model. You won't be able to change it in the future. And I've seen projects failing for this reason. 2 projects. Millions of lines of code to the garbage, to the trash. Because of this. Then, next moment, someone adds phone number to the structure. What happens next? Oops. It leaks out. Yay! How to fix it? Oh, we are experts. JSON ignore. Yay! More responsibility to the same class. Yay! Right? And that class should be the cleanest of your entire code base. So and then you do JSON format because why not? Right? Or even worse, if you're also adding Hibernate to the game and you have a collection, email list, can you tell me what happened? Actually, it writes over there. It's going to lazy load firing a query in the database, shipping the phones as well on the JSON. So you can have, this is basically an embarrassing mistake, honestly. This is a goof. You don't do that, right? No one in the room will probably do that from now on, I'm pretty sure. So the point is here, do not expose your internal structure, but of course expose DTOs. Yay, we knew that. Good. So we separate contract from implementation. This is one of the oldest principles in software engineering. From the dark days of kernel, right? Contract stays put, well-documented, clear in semantic, while the implementation is free to evolve to meet the new requirements, right? Super important to do that in 99% of projects. But the price to pay is, of course, this. DTO set name, entity get name. DTO set email, entity get email. DTO set phone.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Ugly, huh? Any tool you use to do, if you're using Builder or Kotlin, I don't care, it will still be crap. Now, of course, we should be disgusted of such stupid code because it degenerates our brain, basically. And we should use for ways to make it more simple, more elegant. So the solution is obvious, use map-struct. Anyone in the room using any technology in the down there? Map-struct, model mapper, Dozer, Orica. Wow, that's more than half of it. Excellent. So, by the way, before we continue, for the rest of you, this means that while the fields are identical, they are copied back and forth. Simple. The field names should be identical. There is a battle. There can be a battle between these. The map-struct clearly wins it for 3 reasons. It generates source code. And that leads us to 3 advantages. So it doesn't use reflection. It just generates plain Java code. 3 advantages. You can see and breakpoint and debug that code. Secondly, it gets JIT optimized, so it's insanely fast compared to others. And thirdly, if you ever get mad with map-struct, you can always copy the generated mapper from the generated source code into circle main, and you're done. So it's easy to move away if you ever want that. But why would they want to give up on map-struct, right? It's so comfortable. Well, we understood that on the left side, the API has to stay put, has to freeze in place for the clients to depend, while in the right, that thing keeps evolving. So tomorrow, I might want to group the first name and last name in a new structure, full name. Whenever I do that, if I just go to your code base and do a change like this, and I run the build, what should happen? Very important. Those of you who raised the hand, if I run the build after I change one of the structures in a breaking way, what should happen with the build? Should fail automatically, right? Should not just ignore the field. What field? No, should break. So the build should fail, and then you have to adjust the mapping, which can be a bit cumbersome sometimes with default interface, default methods and interfaces, annotations over annotations, can get messy. And the worst part, it could discourage someone from doing the change. It could say, let's add it to the technical backlog. This is the problem, right? It might be tempting us to keep things in sync. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to get out of this that Victor hates Mapstruct. No, I love Mapstruct until I see people until the friction grows too high. If the mapping becomes, wow, super complicated, probably it's time to give up on that, right? So automatic mapping, when it grows complex, switch to manual. By copying the source back in the subdomain for those specific mappers that deserve the honor. Yay, DTOs. Inventory item DTO. There you go. And the same structure is also used when I create the item. What is wrong in this picture? The ID. What else? The date, the activation date. Why would the client send me that? As a matter of fact, status, the activation reason, all of these will never be present when we create an item. Agree? When we create, we send much less data. Both the client and the server will be confused about why do I see the ID in the create flow? Is the user supposed to create an ID? Well, no, it's numeric. How could it be? No, it should be a UUID if you want to go for client-generated identifiers. So the point is that, of course, we will create the response and request objects. I once met a lead architect that told me that if he ever sees classes containing DTO, he's going to have a match with you. He wants only request responses in the DTO package for navigability with IntelliJ. If you type DTO, it will find the package name with shift. No? So basically, you separate the two things, the create flow and the get flow. And when you do that, you can put to your resume that you've done CQRS. Now, pay attention, CQRS stands for Command Query Responsibility Segregation. We don't say separation. Architects always say segregation. That's why they get better salaries. Command query responsibility segregation, which means that we use one data structure in the change flows that update the data, and another structure in the flow to read the data. This is what we just did, right? The story behind CQRS is that at the beginning of a software system, people relate to that system as a store of records. And Excel is there for a reason. This is the first mindset we have when we approach a new system, right? We're going to store some data. Sometimes, right? In some systems. But as time goes by, we will find that when we read data, we need to aggregate reports, sum over, partition by, all sorts of kung fu, joining, fetching more data, and we are going to be deeply concerned about latency and availability. So technically, read flows grow special, while the write flows are deeply concerned about consistency. And they will normally add more information to the storage apart from what you gave it, right? So CQRS segregation comes here to tell you it's okay to use different data structures on the two flows, right? In any non-trivial system, this discussion comes very fast on the table. So this is CQRS at the API level. We have separate, all of us should be doing this probably. Now, we can also apply CQRS between your Java backend and the database, especially useful if you use ORM, Hibernate. Now, guys, if you ever implement a search and you select an entity, a full entity, from the database in your GPQL, you are gonna get rejected by me at pull request. I'm going to tell you, no, wrong, sorry, I'm sorry, nope, try again. Please construct an object that brings from the database exactly what you need. Mind that since this is a Spring conference, there is also Spring projections you can use. You can have an object with getters, an interface with getters that is constructed by Spring, a very sexy thing. But the point is, it's a different model than the one you use when you write. Whenever I'm going to change the data, I'm going to load the full entity, and with deep respect, I'm going to talk to its methods. It's a different approach, right? And this is between you and your database. However, as you are looking to get better latency, better availability under heavy load, at some point, you're going to meet this boundary, the boundary of strong consistency. And you're going to be there exactly like this, Looking, oh shit, I need more availability. I need faster speed. What do? Am I willing to sacrifice consistency? Your business. Should I jump? Okay. Ah! And then it's eventually consistent. What does that mean? It means you're going to be okay. The oldest thing I ever saw, most of us ever saw, is materialized view. Do you remember those days? In Oracle, there was a view you could actually pre-compute. Beautiful. But the problem was that may be out of sync. Beautiful. That's the first thing I ever saw this with like a cache, right? Or you could use Redis for under a millisecond access time, or Elastic for full text, or Mongo to just have a JSON random structure. One of the most insane ideas that I ever heard was someone was actually pre-computing the JSON string of the response and was saving the string as a string in Redis. So when the get came in, they didn't even serialize anything. They were just shipping the string in the response, like poof. CQRS, okay? Now, I will deeply invite you to Google Greg Young and see his famous talks about CQRS if you are still anxious about these problems. CQRS, separate commands from queries. Related to that, should a put or post return the data? In specific, I'm talking about the put. You update something on the server, and the server replies you with data. Anyone guilty? One hand, which both is doing and acknowledges is bad. Very good. Now, ID that the post returns doesn't qualify as data. We have to do that, right? But put to return data, and you know what put returns? Enriched data. Enriched data. Usually in your response, you add more things. Like, let's also give the creation date, a creation user, just in case in the response. Very common I see in my workshops. And they tell me, for client convenience. We do realize today that we are breaking CQRS, yes? That some flows are supposed to create, other flows are supposed to read. You mix them together. So why is this a bad thing by default? Well, first of all, the response that you get from the get is now probably the same object as the response you get from the put. This means coupling. If you change one, you break the other. Yay! Right? Second point, in put, you might actually expose more data than you were given, and you might actually leak sensitive information. This was an exploited vulnerability in production of one of my clients. They lost PII information. By this means, someone attacked and used the response from the put. And that's all I can say. So it's dangerous. Plus, some clients might not need that information that you return. So why are you returning it? For client convenience? No, my friends. You need to provide me with a very strong ADR to win this battle with me. You have to convince me with clear arguments. And if you want to have a debate afterwards, come here and I will tell you the dark stories in which you can convince me. But by default, the answer is no, thank you. They, the client, should follow up with a get. Done. Good. They gave me the slot after lunch. Big mistake. Edit. Did you ever saw an edit button? You click and you edit. Beautiful. This is the beginning of the disaster. And the edit screen looks like this. You edit an inventory item. And you have name, description, supplier, cost, stock, status, deactivation reason. Do you see anything wrong in this screen? You are very far and very small. The stock is interesting, but there is another obvious mistake. What is that? The activation reason, you mean? Why do I see the activation reason if it's active? Right? Why do I see it? I mean, it's active. Why do I see the activation reason? I hope I got your point. I hope that's what you said. So when you put, right, it makes no sense for the user to see the deactivation reason in the screen. Of course, it's easy to fix. You just tell the front end, yay, right? Or do it yourself, perfect. But there is another darker problem with the stock, indeed. The stock has a very big problem. The stock is very volatile. The rate of change of that information is very high. So the risk of keeping it in the screen for too long is terrible. While the user updates the description, some customer buys one of your products, and now in the database there are only 9 items in stock. What happens next can be dramatic. You can actually get sued in Romania about what can happen next. In the most dramatic case, you lose data. You overwrite the stock with the bad value. Now, guys, my dear backend developers, I believe everyone here is backend. When you look at this screen, you should immediately argue, wait a second, how about concurrent updates, right? So one thing you can do is to have the screen just sending how many items do you want to buy, right? The delta, send the delta rather than the whole value, the entire absolute value. That's better, but still not enough. The others can still. There are 2 other options. Optimistic and pessimistic lock. With optimistic lock, you tell the user, sucker, someone was faster, basically. And if you care about the users, you might go for pessimistic locking, which is even fun. Victor is editing this since 3 hours ago. You can't open the edit screen. And then you put the phone number of Victor there. Beautiful. I'm not going to go much into the details about that, because the true solution is to think out of the box, to step towards the user and to watch the user use your application. What are the users usually do with my application? Well, you might find out that the users, when they open the application, they either want to change some text in the green part, or change the supplier and the costs because they bring it from somewhere else, or adjust the stock because they sell over the phone. So they are opening this screen for different reasons, for different purposes. And as a consequence, you could say, you know what, I'm not going to have an edit screen, but I'm going to have buttons. Technically, this is called action buttons over edit screens. Instead of editing some opaque data, Excel style, you have action buttons that match the typical actions of your users. So if the user clicks this checkbox and wants to uncheck the active flag, it's going to be presented with a model asking why. He's going to type the reason, click deactivate, and the job is done. If he wants to change the cost, it only changes the cost. If they want to change to sell, they will sell, sending how many. And if they want to change the description, there. Now, the advantage is that the API and the UI is more meaningful for the user, right? Matches the user intention. It's more convenient guiding the user and the client of the endpoint. The risk is lower for concurrency. It's not gone, it's just lower. And the server is also easier to implement. But it does mean that you care about your users. It does mean usually that you are a full stack and not a back-end siloed team with a Capgemini far away front-end team. It means that you are an organic full stack team. More APIs and more UIs to maintain. But I want to draw your attention again on the URIs. This is the activate. Let's start with the easy one. The details. The details might contain these 3. Fun. I am putting the details, nothing to argue. Here, I am adjusting the cost. I am overwriting the cost, put cost, with this value. Up until here, nothing fancy. But here, there's a glitch. There's a trick. Do you realize that this URL is actually a verb? This is a verb, and you will meet people saying, hey, verbs in URL. This is not RESTful. And they will burn you on a big clay of hay. And they will put masks like this. And they will burn you in. Also here, sell. But you see, there is something different here. This is a post, this is a put. Why is that? Because put overwrites the price with a new value, saying I will still deactivate again and again, but this one is a method which is not idempotent. It's an action they can't retry. Okay? So you're going to convey this by using post instead of put. The story goes a bit more. You can turn it to be idempotent and retriable by including the same idempotency key in order retries random. But to explain the basics, post is not idempotent. So it's a hint, hey, don't retry. But some people are going to burn you for this, right? My story is that the CRUD, if you just do CRUD, this is going to limit your semantics. At some point, the things you're trying to convey to your user is not going to make sense. It's not going to explain the API. And most of your logic is going to land in the put endpoint. It's going to make a mess of your semantics, right? So always be on the lookout. Guys, again, I don't want you to take out of this the idea that it's, let's use verbs anywhere, everywhere. No. You stick to nouns until, in a complex domain, you find that it limits you. You find that it's look, read there. Someone proposed to this, hey, I can delete the activation. I can put the status as inactive and then follow up with the reason. How would I know that to follow up with the... It's not natural, right? Deactivate is far more meaningful. And I want to give you more examples about this. Again, segregate unrelated client actions in different endpoints. This leads directly to patch, guys. Have you ever seen a patch before? Patch, anyone? Yeah, oh my God, we have to talk and we only have 3 minutes. You do patch, and then you include the fields you want to change. You might include the fields you want to remove, and you do not mention the fields that you don't want to change. Beautiful. Good luck parsing this with Jackson. So I really hope all of you that raised their hand are using JSON patch, which provides a structured way to tell, that the client tells you which thing they want to set, which things they want to remove, and when the rest are just not present. Okay? And there is a nice framework in Java also that allows you to apply the patch on an existing object, so on, so on, so on. But that misses semantics, just like before. It doesn't convey the intent of the user. Have you ever seen a Git commit with 300 lines in 20 files that had a commit message like this? This is the exact thing that happens with a patch. Data comes in, why? Right? So, and also the server might start doing if checks to see if the value has changed compared to what I had in the database. I personally wrote code like this 15 years ago. Right? This is much easier, right? I am deactivating something. It conveys semantics. There is a valid use case for patch. When you have a client user interface that wants to change some of your data, but about that part of data, you do not pose any kind of requirements, any kind of rules in the backend. It's opaque data, right? And some client over there, some front end wants to change these 30 fields on their own liking. Okay, if you don't do any logic on that, could work. $500 internal errors. And then this.
Yeah, you got that yummy, yum, that yummy, yum, that yummy, yummy.
Game over.
Never do this, of course. Also fun, missing email. If it's missing email in the request, what status should it be? For 100 or 42 to explain that you are not supposed to retry that. It's your fault, my dear client. And that goes far. There are debates about whether a validation is validation or business rule. If it's a payload validation, not hitting database, any other system, then it's a 400 back, or 422. That's a client fault. The other types of validations are 500 because if they retry, it might work. In the meantime, something might have changed. So it's also nice to give them the email, the problem back. But then they put the email and you reply, missing phone. They put the phone and you reply, missing age. Not nice. So you should return all the errors in one go. Apparently, there is a standard that no one uses, which, who uses this standard? 3 hands in 300 people. Yay! There is a standard. Think of this, maybe use it, to explain where the errors were. Done. So, summary. And I do want to point you to this wonderful talk of David Schmitz, whose humor is unmatched, and I will try to imitate him. I'm not able, but never care about backwards compatibility. After all, who cares? You are the boss. They are just clients. Expose your internal domain. Keep it simple, right? You don't need to introduce mappers, DTOs. Entities out as JSON. Encourage your client to get your API by ID. Make them do that in a for loop. That way you can prove to your boss that your API is useful. Look, boss, how much traffic I do. And therefore your salary might match the price you pay to Amazon. Wonderful. Excellent. And the proxy has many requests for the same reason. Get them through you to justify. Excellent. Reuse the same DTO. Because you need to dry principle, right? You need to reuse as much as you can. Beautiful. All put must return all the data from the database back to the client. Oh, and GDPR, that's for legal, not for you. Right? CRUD is all you need. CRUD is all you need. CRUD is all you need.
All you need is
CRUD. One page to rule them all. Nothing else. And Chuck Norris doesn't do errors. You only live once. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. That's my website over there. And have a wonderful conference.